Firas,
Ronnie, good evening.
what a pleasure. Good evening. What a pleasure it is to speak with you tonight. Thank you for inviting me to interview you.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you for joining. I believe we're matching. Am I right?
I think so, it's the seasonal colors, I
I believe
suppose.
so. Quite festive.
Uh, Firas, they've mentioned already. I think there's no need for us to either of us to really go through our bios or anything so much.
Agreed.
As they said, you're a Palestinian-born New Yorker who's a composer and Kanun player. And you also studied performance and jazz composition at Berklee College of Music in
Mhm.
Boston. Now, some of the people joining us today might not necessarily know what the Qanun is, and I can see it kind of behind you there. Do you think you might be able to just tell us a little bit about your instrument, the Qanun, just to start?
Definitely, yeah. Well, the Kanun is the harp of the East, if you may. It's a form of a zither that has anywhere between 78 or 81 strings. And it's traditionally played when you put on a stand or a table of some sort. I play it on my lap. This is more like of a modern approach, and it's a fundamental instrument on all Near Eastern musics, whether it's Egypt, Turkey, Armenia, Greece, Iran, Azerbaijan, the Levant, Syria, Palestine, Lebanon. And each have their own different slight distinctions or variations, but they're all a form of a qanun. So it's a very familiar and integral part of Near Eastern music, and most importantly, our music, which is Arabic music. So I grew up playing this instrument, which dates back. There's two stories. One story is the Abbasi dynasty in Baghdad. The story goes that Islamic scholar Al-Farabi, who came from Central Asia to Baghdad, brought this prototype of the instrument, and he talked about it in his thesis. So that's like the one of the earliest mentions of the Qanun. But there is one that's much older, which is old Mesopotamia, 5,000 years. And there it's more talked about as if it was like a small ivory made sort of a harp that you put on your lap. So different stories, but they both indicate on the same location, which is present day Iraq, old Mesopotamia, Baghdad. And from there, it made its way, through the different empires into Turkey, Egypt, the Arab world, and the rest of the Near East.
It's fascinating. And the word qanun itself, like when you have a qanun in an orchestra, it's kind of like what the piano is to Western music in many ways. And the word itself means like the law, right?
The law,
Qanun.
yeah.
Is
Yes,
it
my friend.
possible for you to just show us a little bit on the instrument or just kind of show
Absolutely.
us the instrument?
Yeah. Hold on. So this is in its upright form. You see here these metal mandals that we call urab. It's a sort of form of lever. What they do is they alter the pitch by shortening or elongating the strings, sort of like a left finger on a guitar or a oud or a mandolin. And they sit on a bridge, which in itself sits on traditionally fish skin, but this is a synthetic skin, so this is a entirely vegan qanun, if you may. And yeah, let's try it out real quickly. I can also fix the ratio here to make it, yeah. All right, so I hope you can see a
Yes,
little bit.
lovely.
Great.
So what do you play it with? What are those you're putting on
So
your
I
hand?
have these plectrums, traditionally made out of horn material or turtle. These were also synthetic. And I use a form of a ring, metal rings, on my index finger to kind of hold it like this. So it's
Okay.
like a natural extension of your index finger in a way. But I also use uh, the rest of my fingers and fingernails for extended techniques, which is more modern approach of playing the instrument, not so much in the traditional Arabic way. So I use it to arpeggiate or strum, as I will demonstrate. But it sounds something like this. So, so far, what I played was a short improvisation, but it was all in one key. It didn't really modulate, which really didn't need me to require me to change any of the Arab, any of the mandals. So the main function of it is when you want to shift to a new key or change one note. So in this case, let's say I want to move from this. So I had this, then I dropped the levers here, and now it's her. So it's a fantastic system, and you might think that, like a traditional Western classical harp, we might have one or two levers on each string, for the flat, the sharps, and the natural. But you might be surprised to know that we have 12 on each string. So it's a really, really microtonal system. It's beyond chromatic. So in order to move a whole step, you raise all 12. In order to move a half step, you raise 6. And in our Arabic music, we have the quarter tones. In that case, you use 3. So the 12 is like that golden ratio, 12 hours a day, 12 months a year, that you can divide by 3, by 4, by 6, by 2. And that's why I think the Turks, it was a Turkish mathematician that came up with this comma system that I think is so, so brilliant because it brings a lot of flexibility and malleability with the intonation. Sort of like a fretless instrument almost, when each mandal is equal to 1/12 of a tone. So here's what it sounds going up each step of the way. So each time, little by little, it becomes sharper. And if you want to move it by quarter step, like we said, you raise 3. So to the people listening who are not necessarily familiar with that system, you want to imagine the notes that are in between the white and black keys on a piano. Let's say you have a C sharp and a C natural, black and white key adjacent keys. You want to imagine as if there was a gray or a red key in between, right exactly in the middle. And that note would be called C half sharp. So this is C natural, this is C sharp, minor major, and this is C half sharp. So this microtonality is at the essence of our music, and it's not exclusive to our music, of course. You can find it in all Near Eastern music, but also, Chinese music, American bluegrass music, blues music, flamenco, so it's an old phenomena for sure.
Indeed, what a beautiful demonstration and what an amazing explanation too. It's there's so much math going on there. It's truly an instrument of theory, and that's why they call it the Kanun, the law.
Absolutely. I think it has this authoritarian nuance to it with the name. And also, don't forget that usually the rest of the band traditionally tune to the Kanun because it has so many strings. Usually, the instrumentalists tune it first, and then the rest follow that tuning, basically. And it also sets the tempo for the rest of the band because of its plucked nature. So I guess that the name didn't come from a vacuum. Also in Latin, by the way, when we talk about classical music, we talk about the canon, the Bach
Hmm.
canon, or the Baroque. So a canon is basically a phrase, and then you take the same motif and repeat it, and you kind of play with that kind of chronologic reduction. But the idea is that the canon is the reference. This is the first motif, and then the rest follows. So it's derived from the same root, I believe.
Sure, yeah. Very similar to the Canon of Medicine from Ibn Sina, Qanun
Yes,
al-Tibb, which is a
precisely.
book that they used up until the 1800s, even in the West. It's quite amazing to see the confluence of knowledge and music and instruments that come from really Iraq being a very
Yeah.
center of a lot of this in the medieval times, and then going westward. And you were saying something a little earlier too that you were playing traditional, but now you studied actually performance and jazz composition at Berklee College. So you really infuse a lot more than just the traditional sound in this. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know when you and I speak and every time we get together for a project or something, we really go off on a lot of different topics and one of them is, I think we share a similar mission in that we're not here just to show a preservation of tradition. We're here to also show that we're engaged in the world and modernity in general. What are some ways that, what are some of the things that you learned at Berkeley College and some of the ways that you apply different techniques? Because I know that you were saying that you want to go beyond just the vocal tradition in this, that you really want to bring forth a lot of the instrumental tradition with your instrument. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I always said that a musician's true identity is not necessarily where they're from or what type of music they're trained for, but it's mostly what they listen to on a
Mm.
daily basis from their, childhood early on, because that gets to your vocabulary essentially. Same with the literature. If you read Russian literature or Latin literature or whatnot, and a specific type, these types of patterns will get into your writing and whatnot. So I grew up in a house that was musical. My mother is a singer, father is a composer, and there was a lot of international music. Of course, Arabic music was at the heart of it. And when I say Arabic music, that includes Egyptian music, Levantine, Lebanese music, Iraqi music, Aleppo music. All these styles are similar, but they also have their stylistic distinctions. So that was at the heart of it, but there was also a lot of Latin music, flamenco music, Turkish music, Western classical, jazz, and whatnot. And so from an early age, I had this kind of cosmopolitan vocabulary, I would say. Um, and by the time I finished my studies in the conservatory back in Palestine, I felt quite fluent with the Maqam vocabulary and the Arabic repertoire. And I felt like I needed something to push more boundaries and give me another, like an additional dimension, more color, a new vocabulary basically. And I think it was necessary to have that root and foundation before you go into another realm of music, so you have something to compare, sort of like a new language. So when I came to Berkeley, I felt like jazz would be the right choice because there's a certain openness to it, that it's almost like a mindset of adaptivity. And there's also a lot of analogies that could be made between jazz and Arabic music, precisely when it comes to the improvisation being at the heart of it, the fact that it's a vocal and oral tradition, not so much, in the writing. The idea of call and response between the audience and the singer, the idea of, politicized art and statement and protest music and whatnot. So I felt really inclined to dive deeper into that. And that gave me a lot of tools, man. I mean, I studied the jazz composition as a composer, so there's a lot of compositional techniques, improvisational techniques, but also a lot of arranging, orchestration, writing for big band, horns, reharmonization. And suddenly, slowly, all of this started manifesting with my playing on the instrument. Some of the extended technique that I was learning to write for four horns, I'm doing on the Kanun because I can, right? Some of the voicing, some of the harmonizations, the compositional techniques, essentially, what I did with my students even, when I teach the art of taqsim, and for those who don't know, taqsim is the art of the improvisational genre of maqam. A lot of the compositional techniques I acquired in my jazz degree can be applied in a taqsim context. The idea of motivic development, the idea of call and response, the idea of reduction or augmentation of a phrase. A lot of these kind of techniques shaped my musicianship overall. And so now I feel like you said, I'm not only preserving Arabic music, which I'm really loyal to. I'm loyal to the tradition and the repertoire and the aesthetics, but also there's a side of playful rebellion where I want to kind of add some colors, add dimensions, and extend it. And there's many great examples of that in different traditions, like Paco de Lucia, what he did with flamenco, like Aziza Mustafa Zadi, what she did with Mugam, the Aziri Mugam and jazz, like Simon Shaheen, what he did with the Oud, with his Kantara project, and on and on. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Shakti, John McLavin, Zakir Hussain, a lot of these organic fusion that at the heart of is the deep-rooted tradition, but also the open mind to other colors.
And you do something a little bit different than what some other traditions do that are what we would say modal, where they play primarily melody. You really acquired a wonderful knowledge of chords and chordal changes that you seem to apply also to the qanun that I see you sometimes play almost like a piano in many ways.
Yeah.
It's not just a harp, and it's really evident in a lot of the compositions, especially the last ones. Um, so, somebody had mentioned, somebody had asked in our Q&A a little bit about maqam.
Mm.
Um, and they were asking, they hear the word often, but they're not sure really what it means. So it is an Arabic word, that can have a practical meaning to it. You know, it could mean the place where something sits or resides, but it can also mean the status of something or what is your status in something. How would you briefly just explain the word maqam to those who might not know
Yeah,
that this is the tradition of not just the Arabic speaking world, but also of the Middle East at large?
yeah, absolutely. And I think there's another additional meaning which, corresponds to what you said, which is temple, maqam, maqam
Hmm.
al-Nabi, the temple of the prophet, this or that. And I think the idea here, the word has to do with the fact that we have a gravitational center in our music. When we talk about modal traditions, we have a note, and that note is the home note. It's the one note that you really tonicize. And so the maqam, the place that you mentioned, is on this note. But in a practical musical term, it is a few things. It's a vocabulary, it's a reference to a style, it's a set of scales, and it's repertoire, basically. So, sort of like the Indian raga, sort of like when you say, the major and minor keys. It is the raw material that you have to create music with. But it also comes with the aesthetics. Each vocabulary has its own aesthetic. It's not just playing the right notes. It's playing the right notes in a certain manner, with certain ornamentation style, with certain routes that can be musical. Um, it's like Ted Pease said, to describe the word jazz is like describing the word color green. You can't,
Yeah.
and I think that's similar to maqam. I mean, it's really hard, but I think when we talk about maqam, we're not necessarily describing a music style because there's many styles within the maqam tradition, even in Arabic music. You have the dance music, you have the deep listening music, you have the worship music, you have the folk music of the rural areas, you have the classical music of the metropolitan cities. And these are all stylistically distinct, but they all share the same similar vocabulary called the maqam. So it's the raw material that you create the music with, I would say.
It's more of an approach than anything really. It's so in the sense that and I shy away always from people, especially when they say, "Well, music is a universal language," and I won't even get into that topic right now because you know it can universally be accessed, but as a language, it's a little bit different. But you yourself, speaking of languages, though, this would make you are what we would might consider multi-musical in the sense the way somebody might be multilingual, because of this background that you have with improvisation, but not only in the Middle Eastern tradition, you have it also in jazz, you have it in, and I shy away from this word often too, what people might deem, fusion.
Right.
Uh, Fusion is really just being able to be well versed in different musical traditions and finding the commonalities between them. And you've done this also a bit beyond just jazz and fusion. I've heard you play Mozart on the piano, and I've heard you do the same on the Kanun, which is always so fascinating. And you've explored other musical traditions too, like early music. I know that we've done some of those projects together as well.
Absolutely.
How do you see your instrument taking its role in this kind of modern yet also older context? You're kind of like an Ibn Battuta of the Qanun, kind of a Marco Polo.
It is at the heart of my mission, I think. One of my most exciting challenges is to introduce the instrument of the Qanun to new styles and vice versa, these styles to the instrument, without even, getting to introducing it to new audiences. I mean, that goes without saying. But, to try and play Baroque music, early German Baroque, or to try to play medieval Spain music like we did together, or medieval Ottoman music, or to play raga, or to play blues, or to play flamenco. It is so enriching to me, first of all, as a musician, as a student of these traditions, because they're not my traditions. So I have to be very humble and delicate in that regard. Um, when I go into these realms, I try to really dive deeper than just the surface, but I do it with certain humility that this is not my tradition, but let me see how good can I get into it. How much can this sound good on a qanun? And surprisingly, or not surprisingly, it sounds brilliant. Hearing Bach on a qanun sounds almost like it was written for it because it has this harpsichord aesthetic or lauto aesthetic. So, and we did a lot of collaborations with Indian musicians. And when you say Indian music, it's also a big word. There's so many styles within that. And it takes a lot to try to master the gamaka, which is the ornamentation art of South Indian music. But I think these attempts at entering these kind of musics enrich you as a musician. Again, I listen to Mozart, I listen to Bach, I listen to Zakir Hussain. That's why I feel at home when I try to play him. Again, that goes back to my main point: is that you are what you consume as a musician or as a listener, first and foremost. And then you can take the next step, which is the study and training of the art form. And so far, if I want to kind of describe my musical activity, I think I can divide it into a few categories. One is my personal project, which puts the Kanun at the center of a 5-piece band or a 4-piece band or an 8-piece band, depending on the project. But it basically takes the Maqam as the main lingo and fuses it with my other influences. Another category would be when I play classical Arabic music, like with the National Arab Orchestra or other contexts. Then you would have a taht ensemble, and a taht ensemble is the traditional Arab ensemble, where you have the Kanun, the Nahi, the Arabic bamboo flute, the Oud, the Riq, which is the Arab tambourine, and the violin. And that's also like a really major pleasure of mine as a musician. And then the third category would be all the other styles that I love getting into it, whether playing with Greek music, Turkish music, the early music concerts we did with you with the Newberry concert in Chicago or the Folger concert in DC was a really enriching experience. So I think it's an ongoing process. I aspire for more. I want to try the Kanun with an orchestral setting, sort of like a concerto trial. I want to try it with a jazz trio. I want to try it with it's endless, but it's not only about the instrumentation, it's also about the style. I would love to do a solo EP where I play Baroque or classical, but it requires a lot of depth of training for sure.
And knowledge. So you show that, it's just an instrument. It's a voice in some ways that you can voice many different traditions as long as you kind of go through the steps to learn about those traditions.
Absolutely, because
Uh,
I expect the same from people from outside my tradition to do the same when they study maqam.
I
That's
agree with
simple as
you
that. Yeah.
100% on that. It's a wonderful way to also foster global citizenship, to become more tri-musical, poly-musical, if you will, in your languages and understand the way the world and other cultures interpret sound.
Indeed.
I want to pivot a little bit to just, on the topic of influences as well. But before that, I wanted to ask you, can give us a fun fact about you.
A fun fact about me. I don't know how fun it can be, but I like to play ping pong. It's one of my favorite sports to play. I won 4 tournaments in college, but
Wow.
I still feel rusty. I haven't played in a while. Chess is one of my biggest passions, like on the side. I love reading a lot, but I can't quite like think of a extremely fun fact right now.
Well, one fun fact, I know that you recently celebrated a birthday. Is that not right?
Yes, I'm still recovering from it. Last night we had a beautiful, beautiful party here in Brooklyn with a lot of friends. I just turned 30 years old.
Wow.
So it feels great to be able to, go live on the air. It was my first day in this new decade, full of excitement for, what's to come, musically
That's
and
beautiful.
not. Yeah.
I wish you many, many happy years.
Thank you, brother.
Um, so I'm really curious always too. Like I grew up in a musical family. My dad was a musician as well. My brother's a musician, and from the age 12, basically we were playing all these weddings in Chicago.
Mm.
We had a regular gig at the nightclub, and that was my life from age 12 till pretty much now. And it's always fun to meet other people who also grew up in a musical family. And I know you mentioned your mom, Amel Murkos, who is a Palestinian legend in music, who sings many different varieties as well. Can you tell us what are some of your most fondest memories growing up in a musical family? Like how old were you when you started playing out, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it was just always musical in the house, whether it's rehearsals or she would be singing, my father would be playing guitar or oud, accompanying her, um, being with her at the studio, in concert, backstage, soundcheck. These are all very fun memories. But I think one of the most special memories were the ones when I started to play. Um, Sometimes my father would pick up the oud or the guitar and give me like a durbaki or percussion, and I would try, as a child. But then later on, when I picked up the Kanun, that was a pivotal transition because I was finally able to, play my music, Arabic music. I was playing cello before that, was a lot of, Haydn and Bach, which was great. But the Kanun was that shift. And I remember a very fond memory um, of my father coming home, after a long day in the evening. And I was maybe first year playing Kanun. And up until then, it was mostly, playing these etudes, very simple stuff. And we had an org, the org, the Oriental Farfisa
Keyboard for sure.
keyboard, and it had some like plugins. If you just press, it would start playing like
Yeah.
music,
A demo song or
a demo
something.
song. So one of the demo songs was a cocktail, what we call a cocktail, which is like a medley of well-known Egyptian and Arabic songs played instrumentally in a wedding style. You know the aesthetic.
I totally
And
do.
I memorized it by heart. We know because we used to play it all the time. But
Yeah.
it starts with a Kanun Taqsim on Maqam Siga,
Mhm. Ah,
like very short intro, 50 seconds. So I took it upon myself to transcribe that solo and try to imitate it on my instrument, on Maqam Huzam. And I spent maybe all day trying to get it right. And then I noticed my father coming home, parking his car. So I'm like, I'm ready for it. I'm gonna like try it casually. And so once he enters, I do the whole taqsim. And I think that was the first moment where he realized, like he was so happy. He got so excited. He came and gave me a hug. The
oh,
idea was that I think taqsim is at the heart of your virtuosity as an Arab musician, because as you said, Arabic music is extremely vocal, which means 90% of the repertoire is songs with lyrics. So as an instrumentalist, you don't really have a repertoire to study from a lot, unlike Western traditions. So
mhm.
the biggest moments to shine and the biggest genre for you as an instrumentalist is taqsim, is the improvisational genre, and it has that oomph to it. So I think that was a really sweet moment where like I kind of made it seem as if it was my taqsim. It wasn't my taqsim, but I faked it. And then I learned a valuable lesson, which is imitation is key
Mm.
to start your learning journey in an oral tradition. And then when I went to Berkeley, I saw all these sax players and the trumpet cats. They're transcribing Charlie Parker or Coltrane and whatnot. I was like, oh, I did the same back then, but with Muhammad Abdul Saleh or Abraham Salman or Abdul Abdul Al. So yeah, I guess these early memories as a child and seeing your parents start appreciating your talent more was a really beautiful incentive to keep
What
going.
a beautiful memory. How old were you when that
I
happened?
think maybe 9 or 10.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I remember the keyboard very well. As you can see, I got mine behind me here because I played keys mainly. That's how I learned Middle Eastern theory
Yeah,
in many of the clubs and stuff. And it's interesting. And then you make your shifts to the traditional instrument of your choice that
exactly.
calls to you. What a beautiful thing. Um, what were some of the things that you listened to like growing up? I know you mentioned like this the Levantine music, but specifically, like who was that? Like my dad was very much into Egyptian music, so I grew up hearing a lot of Abdul Wahab, Abdul Halim, Kulthum, of course, the great giants. But we did listen to a lot of Wadi Asafi, and I think I see a Wadi Asafi picture behind you up there with the color,
Yeah,
with the hat on the fedora.
I call this the Wall of Fame. We can go
Yeah.
through it in a minute for sure. I think if I have to describe it, I think it was phases. And
Yeah.
looking back was so beautiful as a child, because you're like a sponge getting all this information. There was a phase as a child, I was listening, maybe me and my father were very big on Wadi Safi. I kind of inherited that from him. So we would listen to a lot of Wadi Safi, and he's like the legendary voice of Lebanon. And we would really dig into like rare recordings, rare songs, and he was so prolific. So Wadia was like my biggest probably. Fairuz was the other one, and that came from also from my parents, which is the Lebanese diva of Arab singing. Fairuz and Wadia, and then there was also a lot of political music. Obviously, I grew up in a socialist household, so a lot of the left wing artists in the Arab world were very common in our house. I'm talking about Ziad Rahbani, Marcel Khalifi, Sheikh Imam, Ahmad Qabour, Firqat al-Ashiqeen. So a
Hmm.
lot of that you grow up with because the lyrics mean something, and usually it was catchy songs. But then I remember when I really took that depth leap, and that's like maybe when I was like 13, I discovered Kulthum. on my own. And my parents weren't really big on it on her. I mean, they respected her, they liked her, but they weren't really consuming her as much as the other that I mentioned. So I felt addicted to Egyptian music at the time. So Kulthum, Abdul Wahab, and it seemed to me as if it was slightly heavier to consume firsthand. It takes longer to consume an Kulthum song. We're talking about 50-minute song, 8-minute intro,
Hmm.
4 minutes musical interludes in between, and she repeat and repeat and repeat. And repetition is a key aspect to get into that what we call the tarab or the sultana, which is the extasa or trance, sort of like a duende in flamenco. You get into
Hmm.
this state through repetition, and each time with repetition you add some ornamentation. And I think that's where I learned that ornamentation is the main form of variation in Arabic music. So that was a phase that took a few years. And when you say Kulthum, you're talking about the whole world. You're talking about Sumbati,
Yeah.
Baligh Hamdi, you're talking about Zakaria, Abdul Wahab. All of these are composers that almost devoted their career towards her career.
Yeah.
And from there, you consume other Egyptian music. Karim Mahmoud, Layla Murad are some of my favorites. Farid, طبعا.
Mm.
But then the other one was like the modern stuff. Like I remember being fond of a lot of modern day Turkish musicians. Trio Taksim, Haytach Dugan is a Kanun legend. He revolutionized the instrument in his own terms. Göksel Baktagir, another master.
Oh,
Hosni
yeah.
Sandalnarici is a
Clarinetist. Yeah.
clarinet Turkish, virtuoso. Ismail Tunçbilik. And it seemed, I really thank them. I'm really grateful to them because they were very authentic. They were very well, deep rooted in their tradition, but they kind of brought it into life. They brought it in a modern way, in a almost like a sexy way of music. You know what I mean? It was tempting in terms of the sound, in terms of the mix, in terms of the product itself. It seemed contemporary. It seemed like it's the music of today, and I loved that. And so Turkish music took a lot of my attention, and then Armenian music took a lot of my attention because Armenia is really big on Kanun. Slightly
Hmm.
different. It's not microtonal, but they have a lot of great pedagogy of the instrument. It's one of the only countries where you'll see 30 Kanun players on stage.
Wow. Wow.
And from there, my sister used to play jazz piano. She got me into, old school jazz, Louis and Ella,
Mm.
Sinatra as well, and that was a good, introduction before going to Berkeley and diving deeper with the instrumentalists. But I guess one of my biggest influences as well is Paco de Lucia. There's something about, you know, flamenco. Of course, you know why I might feel at home. There's a big Arab lineage there, North Africa, south of Spain. So I understand the cultural connection. But Paco specifically also brought that kind of freshness to it. These darker colors that when he worked with, Al Di Meola or Chick Corea
Sure.
or his later sextet, it felt that
He
he preserved the tradition but also enriched it. That's the beauty of it, I think.
and paid homage to it too. He even had an album called Ziryeb, which
Absolutely.
actually gives homage to, what we go back to the Abbasid dynasty in
Abbasid
Baghdad, Iraq.
dynasty into the Umayyad dynasty in Andalusia, and Azariab goes way beyond music. It's culture.
Hmm.
The three-course meal, the etiquette, the fashion. He was such a
Yeah.
intellectual.
Trendsetter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, what are you listening to right now? What's got your ear for
Yeah. So a small confession. I just got my Spotify whatever. At the end of the year, they tell you what your listening age is. Mine was 87. I wasn't too surprised. And because I'm a person who love to listen to the stuff that I know and that I like, I listen to a lot of. I have my playlists. There's a lot of Bill Evans. There's a lot of Oscar Peterson. There's a lot of Paco.
Mm.
There's a lot of Bach,
Oh,
Haydn. I love a lot of Brazilian musicians. Ginga is one of my favorites. Gilberto Gil, Hermeto Pascoal, Yamandu Costa. There's also Aziza Mustafa Zadi, Ghafer Youssef. So a lot of different musics, but I have been listening to new stuff as well. Some of the young and contemporary musicians that I really value. I will mention Hazim Shaheen, an amazing Egyptian oud virtuoso that he just released a record earlier this year called Dhikr. And
mm.
actually, it was musically supervised by Ziad Rahbani, the late Ziad Rahbani, who just passed away. And I think it was maybe the last record that Ziad worked on. And you can really sense his presence there in the musical decisions and in the timbre and the overall sound. Laith Siddiq, a colleague of mine, friend of mine as well, he released an album I had the pleasure of being on earlier this year. João Barradas is also a dear friend, but he's an amazing, amazing accordionist from Portugal that released a record that I've been listening to. This is like, this week. But definitely check out these cats. João Barradas is an amazing composer and accordionist from Portugal. Hazim Shaheen from Egypt. Laith Siddiq from Iraq.
Of course.
So many others. I mean, I don't know.
And I know you have obviously very eclectic tastes in an 87-year-old man's taste in music. But some of these people you're naming too, I know, you've collaborated with some big names and you've collaborated with a lot of people. And this reminds me of one of the questions we have actually in our Q&A here. And it's by a Kanun player, somebody I actually happen to know who used to be a Chicagoan. And she was just asking about bridging multiple genres of music. I'm going to augment to this question a little bit, where she's asking specifically, how do you find new musical collaborations or start with your own independent study before venturing into new groups? And I think a lot of it has to do with listening, obviously. But what's it like when you collaborate with people from another tradition? What are some of the expectations you have, or what are some of the things that you bring? Or that you might learn from, what are the compromises that might occur too?
Well, I must confess that after 5 years at Berkeley and doing endless collaborations outside of my comfort zone, it was traditions that I wasn't necessarily as fluent in, but it really shaped me as a musician and it really made me a better musician, playing Venezuelan music or Indian music and whatnot. And after 5 years of that, and after a composition degree where you have your teachers telling you how not to write music or how to write music, I developed this sense where I feel like, okay, now I really want to do whatever I want. And so for the past few years, post-college, living in New York, post-COVID, I have been mostly focused on my own project. And that meant that I get to, dictate what kind of aesthetic I want. So the first record was a solo album for the Kanun, which naturally had all these different influences because, like we said, so far, they manifest subconsciously. And then Salute was my first full-length album with my 8-piece band, and it had a lot of these different influences, but maybe more, on a deeper level, I think. It has a lot of harmonic structures, modal structures, odd meters, improvisation, orchestration. And now my third album is supposed to be released in the spring. And it also has another dimension that I didn't have before. It features a jazz quintet, but it also features other instruments, and it feels more mature in a way. And I'm happy to say that. As for the collaborations questions, it's either I get called by someone to join them in a collaboration, and if I think that it's fruitful and I think it's musically interesting, then I go there with a lot of love and openness. I think openness is the key word here. And it's very important not to get gimmicky. So you come, bring your language, they bring theirs, and you try to meet in the middle. We just did a beautiful event in Boston in collaboration with the Arab American Museum in Dearborn, actually. They collaborated with the Pao Art Center, the Chinese center in Chinatown, Boston, because today's Chinatown in Boston used to be Little Syria in the past century. So it was, commemorating this lineage between the two. And so I was invited to perform, and I performed with a Chinese musician who plays the guzheng, which is like another form of Chinese zither. And it was such a beautiful meeting. We played one original of mine, one original of hers. And it's just the timbre of the two instruments together was so, so majestic that we were now talking about, maybe taking this to another level and do a duo album or something. But again, this whole thing with collaborations and traditions, we don't want to get into the trap of purism. I'm not a purist, We're Palestinians. I mean, well, we had, like our blood lineage is so mixed. The whole thing about the whole region. When you have the Canaanites, you have the Sumerians, you have the Phoenicians, you have the Ottomans, the Mamluki, the Seljuqi, the
Persians,
British, the
Egyptians.
Zionists. Yeah, now you're talking about a millennia of all of that. And Obviously, we have a lot of Ottoman influences, and they have a lot of Arabic influences, and so on. So I cannot really come from a microscopic view and try to be a purist and detach myself from and say this is how Arabic music sounds like, and this is mine. It's like, a lot of traditions have this competition that this is mine, this is mine. I don't know. I don't
I hear
particularly
you.
fall into the I like authenticity, but not to the point of purism, because it's a fallacy. It's not. I don't think it's real.
I agree. Music is such an iterative process. Even the development of instruments, you can see, oh, this is the pipa is similar to the oud, which is similar to the lute, which is similar to, this instrument. And as you mentioned right now, the kanun and the gujeng. And, technically, we can even say that these are two Asian instruments. I
Yeah.
mean, many people don't realize
Yeah,
that
West
the
Asian
Middle
and
East,
Southeast Asian for sure. Yeah.
exactly, yeah.
Which
Many
further
people,
which further strengthens the Farabi theory, because he
yeah.
came from Central Asia, so it's safe to assume that he saw a Gujing before coming to Baghdad. So
For example,
yeah, it's a safe assumption to make, but I don't know particularly. There's different stories historically.
well, even instruments like the santur in Iran and Persia
Yeah,
are,
for sure.
thousands of years old. I mean, there are stone statues of people holding these types of instruments that look basically like a qanun, and then, with development and variations depending on what materials are available to people and what aesthetic a particular area might have for
Absolutely.
that music. And I'm so glad that you mentioned your work too, because I know you even had on your website, you had an earlier album that you released called Lullaby for Nature. Um, and then you had your solo album, which I've listened to, and
Yeah.
I've actually used a couple of pieces to curate for an exhibit that the Palestine Museum had at the Venice Biennale several years
Oh,
ago.
fantastic. My honor.
And then Salute, which I absolutely loved because I remember seeing you come play at Chicago when you were on tour with the group,
That's
and
true.
I just saw something that, like you said, we have this strange dichotomy right now that we're breaking out of, I think, from what is ostensibly considered a Western gaze on the Middle East in general. That, there's this preservationist type of mentality that we're frozen in time, that we never ascribed to modernity. But, here you are completely dispelling that. And I would even say that many of our predecessors have dispelled that. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention to our audience members that, we are, like you said, both Palestinian artists, but that doesn't mean that, our culture is a monolith. I know something often expected of me is to perform folk music of my heritage. And the irony of that sometimes is it's that the expectation is there from my own people as well. But sometimes, I just want to do something that comes from my other background in rock and roll, jazz, or classical music, because, one's culture is not a monolith, and we have multiple dimensions. I'm just really curious, like, culturally speaking, how do you have you had similar expectations of you, and how have you been able to navigate some of those waters?
Yeah, I have it. I have these conversations with my agent. I had it when I performed as an artist selection at the WMX, the World Music Expo. There was a lot of talk in the back that, hey, try to make it more traditional, try to make it more ethnic,
Hmm.
be away from, so it's like a lot of that, you're catering to a certain expectation for the market that you're not necessarily there. That was my training. This is my heritage, of course, but I want to be the music of today. You know what I mean? This is my idiom. This is my language, but doesn't mean I have to repeat it. And this is a very triggering subject, because if you talk about Palestinian music, what the Nakba did in 1948 to the natural cultural evolution of Palestinian culture and music was a traumatic disruption of that process, right? So you got 750,000 Palestinians displaced, and you got this whole disruption of the demography and the geography of the place. And suddenly, those who remained, and my grandparents included, were excluded and disconnected from their natural extension, which is the Arab world, which is Egypt, Lebanon, and Syria. This is by nature was so, and Palestine is the heart between all that. So I believe, looking back, as a survival mechanism, they tried, the Palestinians that remained, they tried to hold on to whatever Arab culture they have left as a survival mechanism, because now you have a whole machine trying to erase that culture. And so they became so fluent with Egyptian music and Syrian music and Lebanese music because that was the only way to stay in touch with your lineage that was disrupted.
Mm.
Okay, so now you have a thing where Palestinians might be the most versatile musicians in the Arab world. We're familiar with Aleppo music, Baghdad music, and Cairo music, and Lebanese music more so than some of the sometimes the people from those areas. So in a way, that helped shape our taste and repertoire, and it helped us be more deep rooted in our Arab culture. But what it did, and this is the sad part, is that it disrupted the natural evolution of Palestinian music.
Mm.
You have 50 years that we redid the music of the past 50 years just to
Mhm.
survive. Okay,
Mm.
so it wasn't until the late 80s or the early 90s where you had sincere attempts in creating modern, original Palestinian music,
Sure.
like Amal Murqus, my mother, like Sabrine, like
Hmm.
Simone Shaheen, and other examples. But I'm just saying that it took a lot of time for us to start and catch up with that because of that trauma. So when you come to me as a presenter or an agent and expect me to play just folk music, and when we say folk music, we're talking rural music, not even classical music. It's a bit dismissive because while I love this tradition, I want to also be part of today. And that doesn't mean to rebel against the past, no, but to build on it, accumulate it, use that vocabulary. And so I like, a lot of times people ask me, do you play any other instruments? Now, it seems at first as a sincere, innocent question, but the way I hear it is, do you play any real instruments?
Mm.
Any real
Mm.
Western instrument?
Mm.
A violin or a viola or a saxophone, because I'll take you seriously. This, it's an ethnic instrument. What does that
Mm.
even mean? So and usually what I like to do is some of my shows I play like a Bach sonata on the Kanun, and
Yeah.
suddenly not only I can play your music, I can play the creme de la creme of your music. So it has
Sure.
a certain playful statement, but the implication is that our music is worthy of respect, and it's more than just traditional music of the past. It's lively, and we intend to enrich it and keep it alive.
Yeah, as we would say in Arabic, Nawar alaik, man. You've really you've acquired a lot of wisdom since your birthday.
It's the 30s. It's the 30s speaking.
Mashallah. And you know what? I know a lot of it too because you and I have a lot of discussions outside of just music, and we talk about, you're an extremely well-read individual in many languages, with poetry, with literature, and I'm sure a lot of these things influence your philosophical outlook on life. And I couldn't agree with you more because I do run in similar circles and I run into the same kinds of things. And as you mentioned, some of the other folks I might even go as far to say, even though it was protest music, is, groups like Bara'im, or Zainab Ish'ath, or these are other artists who are Palestinian artists who
Underground, yeah.
underground and myself being a Palestinian American born here, for example, we had to also not just embrace our folk tradition, but also understand that we're part of the diaspora. And for better or for worse, that diaspora has also given us not only the ability to absorb other music from other people, but also to develop a process of assimilation and a process of absorption that is befitting of one who is in diaspora.
Mm.
Um, so it's an irony at the same time, I would say too. Um, so you've kind of explained right now a lot of the scope of modernity and preservation. Where do you see um, yourself, obviously, with this forthcoming album that you have, inshallah, in April? Um, what other aspects of modernity do you see that could filter out into also into the Arab world? How do we bring this back into the fold and rehash a question that came about as far back as the 1932, Cairo Congress,
Mm.
when scholars from a lot of the Western world came to try to make sense of music of the Arab world. Now we are here nearly a century later, uh, and with folks like you, with other new artists similar to the ones that you've named before as well, even like Sinat Musa, for example, and a lot of these artists who are using these other instruments, but also using traditional instruments to create a new sound out there, or just to show that their influences extend beyond the rural or just a small geography. How do you? How do you see that? Do you see that affecting the way the West, if you will? I'm going to keep using this term because we really are at an apex here in the world, in societies and cultures, particularly with what we see in the media. I mean, we can't ignore this. Art is a filtration process, and we're conduits to what's happening in this world. And so do you see that the music that we're creating right now, it not only represents us, but also is a way that we can show ourselves as also being on par as global citizens? Because this, what you said before, is the thing that bothers me. It's like but do you play a real instrument? It reminds me of I was once commissioned to write a song with a munshid who was he was like basically a Muslim cantor. You know this, and he wanted to sing this kind of spiritual Islamic song, and he was commissioned to do so from an organization. And one of the people that was he was kind of like overseeing the project came by and he wanted to hear what we were working on. So I wanted to keep it very bare bones, and I just put some normal percussion on it, some frame drums, a
Mm.
little bit of oud. That's it, and then vocals, and we arranged some of the vocal harmonies. Well, this person came by and he says something, it's great and everything, but you need to take out anything that has jingles, and you need to take out the oud. If you want to put a piano or guitar, that's okay. I,
Yeah.
I won't explain to you how livid I was
No,
about
but I
this.
think that sums it up pretty well. And
Yeah.
back to your question about modernity, and I think this is at the heart of the problem, is the misconception of confusing modernity with westernization.
Yeah.
If you look at pop music now in Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, and the rest of the Arab world, the Gulf, it almost sounds like American pop music, but with Arabic lyrics. There's a formula, and there's and when we talk about pop, obviously there's more of like a narrow-minded formulas for it. But I'm trying to say, like, there's a notion of aggressive globalization that is not healthy the way it used to be, um, when cultures borrow from each other and they naturally kind of try to meet in the middle. No, in this case, let's take out your aesthetics and give you our aesthetics, and now make Arabic music with these aesthetics. Give me some, chords, four chord songs, and sing in Arabic, but even their accent is going to sound more, Western now. And that's a common phenomenon now. As for the traditional music, you'll play it in museums for later, and I think that's a very sad scope to look at it. I don't think modernity has to do necessarily with Westernization, um, and that's a trap that even fellow Arab musicians fall into. I have a good friend who's a musician, but he also works at a big label as an A&R, and he keeps referring to me as a classical musician. I'm like, man, I'm like the furthest from that. Yes, I come from that background, but my music is highly modern. I think of myself as a very improvisational musician, a revolutionary composer, in the sense that I'm not preserving only, I'm enriching. But you
Mhm.
call it classical because it's not Western. You know what I mean? It's because it's Kanun and it's Maqam lingo, it's classical.
Mm.
So when you say classical, we have to remember that classical is a subjective term against time.
Yes.
It can't be classical if it was made today.
Right.
Hopefully it will become classical 50 years from now. But now it has to be contemporary. And that's how classical music used to be called. It wasn't called classical at the time. And so
Exactly.
this confusion between modernity and westernization is the sad part. And like the example you said, he wanted the piano to make it seem more, uh, you know,
Approachable
yeah, I
almost. Yeah.
guess. So
Or yeah, that very wise words, really. And I think this is something that we contend with. I always do a little shtick when I'm playing on stage sometimes, and I'll say classical music, and I'll then reiterate and just tell people that Western classical music
right.
versus Eastern versus Indian classical,
Mm,
because so many people just use the term as if we're supposed to immediately understand that you're talking about Austrian composers or German composers
right.
or French composers. And I think that that is the first step. We have to use our music and our knowledge in some ways to almost this is a form of decolonization too, because what we run into is what we might consider white idolatry in some cases, and I don't like to jump into these terms and
Right.
terminologies necessarily, but when I see it, enacted before me, it's very important to call it for what it is too. That there's a form of psychological colonization that people don't realize that no, you come from a very not only a rich tradition, we come from a tradition that gave, agriculture from the Fertile Crescent, writing from the Sumerians, musical instruments from, over 3,000 years ago. The Nai being something that's written in, that's painted on Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Absolutely.
Uh, and I think it's really, really important to know that, but not to stay stuck into that time, as you're kind of mentioning. Um, I know we had a few questions here,
Yeah.
um, and I think they're pretty quick to answer. If you would like to take a stab at some of these, and one of them was, where can we find recordings of Bach and others I'm going to say Western classical music on the Kanun?
I don't have plenty, but I did one recording of the prelude to the cello suite in G major on the Kanun maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and it's on YouTube. You might enjoy that, yes.
Fantastic. That's going to be great. I'm going to be binging on that now too. We have a mutual friend of ours who is a brilliant, brilliant instrument maker. In fact, I play one of his instruments, and you know him as John Vergara. And he was just asking, when are you going to be performing in North Carolina?
Ah, John, we just missed each other. I was playing in Black Mountain, North Carolina, just outside of Asheville at the Leaf Festival, the Global Arts Festival. And that was mid-October. I wish I known. I don't know if you were close. And we're sad to miss you here in New York. We'd loved having you here. But I hope you're doing well, brother. And definitely, I'll keep you posted next time.
Yes, John Vergara, if you guys don't know, check him out. He's got Lord of the Strings, one
I
of
love it.
one of the most gifted luthiers I've ever known.
Indeed.
Um, and makes qanuns and ouds and guitars
And
and tres,
Quattros.
cuatro, and
Yeah.
yeah, just everything. Um, Somebody asked a question here. Who have been some vocalists that you enjoyed working with?
Mm. Well, my mother goes without saying. I work with her the most. I enjoyed working with Abir Nami, Lebanese vocalist.
Mm.
The experience with Roger Waters was very special because, this legendary rock star icon. We did one of, some of his hits, "Wish You Were Here" and "We Shall Overcome." It was a beautiful rendition.
You and I got
Residente.
to play those. I grew up on Pink Floyd, so you and
Yeah,
I have to
there
play
you
those
go.
next
But with
time.
Kanun, I gotta send you a recording of that. Residente is one of my most recent collaborations. An amazing Puerto Rican hip hop artist or a rapper, more that is very, very vocal and just an amazing lyricist. So we did a song from scratch where I put like the progression, did the Kanun intro, the main composition, and he added the lyrics in Spanish. And then we extended it where I wrote some lyrics in Arabic, and we hosted my mother Amal Murqus to sing the Arabic parts. Um, Other singers that I can think of, I mean, plenty. In the Arab world, I would say I enjoyed playing with Brahim Azzam shortly
Oh
from
yeah,
Palestine.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
enjoyed
grew
working
up
with
on his
Walid
recordings.
Tufi. It was fun, of
Oh
course.
wow, really? You play?
Yeah, that was
That's amazing.
Marwan Khouri. These are like, Arab
Yeah.
pop stars. Ilyas Karam. Shreya Ghoshal is definitely one of the most fascinating voices I ever heard. Shreya Ghoshal is an amazing Indian artist. We
Mm,
worked together when I was still in college. Ainur Dugan from Kurdistan,
mhm.
fantastic artist. Shankar Mahadevan, also India, brilliant voice. And the list goes on, but yeah, I was very fortunate to share the stage with such amazing musicians that I learned a lot from.
And you have such a strong sensibility to that, growing up with a vocal icon, your mother as well, which is amazing. That's a really important aspect. So when you're, coming with that knowledge already, it gives you the tools to recognize, to analyze really like what's so deep about the way somebody sings. Um,
Sure.
Another couple questions here. Have you ever played with a Ukrainian bandura player?
No, but I would love to. That sounds exciting. No, I haven't.
I'd love to hear that actually too. My
Makes me
my
happy.
sister-in-law is Ukrainian actually, and so I've heard some bandura music. And traditionally, I think a lot of female vocalists used to
Yeah.
sing this instrument too. And it kind of looks almost like an auto harp meets a qanun meets a multiple stringed instrument here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Please send me some if you have any specific recordings you think I should listen to. I would love to.
for sure, for sure. Layla Khaybar here,
Mm.
who's also a journalist, is asking us, well, She's asking, when will you plan a nationwide Arab music festival that spans all genres? Would love to have it in DC. And to that, I'm just going to also preface very quickly too that as much as we would love to plan a festival, I think it's going to be on people who plan festivals for us to invite us. So Leila, if you're volunteering
Yeah,
uh, to help
I'm
us with that,
honored. I'm flattered by this prospect, Layla, and I think we should make it happen. But you know, we're musicians, we're artists. So, but maybe, why not?
Yalla, let's talk, she says. So I that would be wonderful. And I'm sure, any programming ideas, you're the guy that basically to come and talk to here.
Thank you, brother.
Somebody mentioned something here, and they said that they read that the Kanun is also popular in West Africa. And they're asking, have you ever collaborated with any West African artists? I think the Kanun and the Kora would be lovely together. And while I agree that the Kora and the Kanun, two types of harps, would be lovely together, I would say that the Kora can be considered somewhat of like a Kanun of West Africa. But West Africa is also, it's like saying,
Mauritania.
yeah, it's.
Mauritania is West Africa, you know, and they have the Kanun. Morocco has the Kanun, but I don't know.
Mhm.
I didn't hear that the Kanun is played in, you know,
Like
Senegal,
Senegal.
Senegal or Mali. Maybe in Mali a little bit,
Yeah.
but maybe it's a different form of Kanun. But no, I mean, I love these types of traditions and musics. I'm a fan of many of them, and I have many friends who are artists from those kind of styles. But I don't think I have. Well, I had a short collaboration with the kora player, but I was still a student at the time. But it was a beautiful, beautiful meeting between the two instruments. But no, I'm yet to do like an official collaboration with the kora artist. I saw Sona Jobarti from
Ah,
Gambia, fantastic
yeah.
kora virtuoso, a few months ago in New York, and I was really, you know, fascinated by her talent. Maybe one day I would love to, for sure.
She's amazing. Yeah, I think you guys would hit it off. She's a very sweet person, and I saw her in Chicago actually.
Wow,
And she's a griot, so she comes from a lineage of musical
exactly,
purveyors
generation.
throughout her career, her family lineage. Very much like what we've carried on in our families as well. There's another question here that would you agree to say that a maqam is the scale, but also a personal interpretation of the artist? So it's not just the keys.
The scale would be an aspect of the maqam. So
Mm,
definitely the scale is determined by the maqam, but it's not just a scale. It would be shortcutting the maqam if you just say it's a scale,
I agree.
because it's also a behavior. It's a route,
Mm-hmm.
and we have different maqams with different names who share the same notes. This is very fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have the same exact scale on a different note, and it will have a different name, but it's not just because of the name or the timbre. It's because of the repertoire on that particular scale. So let's say we have C major and E flat major. So imagine if you have different repertoires on both. That's the equivalent of that, and
Yeah.
it has to do with the limitation of the instruments, any instrument, and the voice. So you know, if your register can't hit that high note but can hit this low note, then maybe Bayati on G would be great. And so you're kind of exploring the lower register of that. If you're doing Bayati on D and you're going, you know, more to the, you know, octave, and it changes the composition. This is what I'm saying. So that's what I mean, that the maqam is more than just a scale. It's the behavior of the scale. Which
Mm-hmm.
notes do you articulate? Which sweet spots do you really tonicize? Where do you modulate? This is more of a deeper level of understanding the maqam. That it's not just the group of 7, 8 notes, but also what do you do with these notes?
Even in Western traditions, relatively speaking, even that group of seven notes or whatever it might be is still a somewhat newer kind of introduction if we're looking even just back as, 4 centuries, 5 centuries, something like that. Because prior to this, a lot of music actually also functioned in a similar way. It was very modal, the church modes as they kind of talk about those. And this is where my, point comes in to say also that there really wasn't, and this is a point of contention between the West when we were talking about the Cairo Congress in 1932 and the present, that a lot of people feel that in the 17th, 18th century that Arab music stopped evolving and all we were relegated to was preservation, when in fact, actually, no, it's been a continual flow just because the instruments, some of them remain the same. They also evolved, but the music also kind of evolved, but we were just a continuum of using the same music. Like you were saying, if I play Farah Faz, that's not the same as playing Nahawand necessarily, or Busalik, or another
Absolutely.
one of the maqamat. They have different colors to them, they have different emotions to them, different timbres, where something sits.
Yeah, no, no, I agree. We didn't come with this music from a vacuum. It didn't start
No.
in 1914, that's for sure. So
Exactly.
obviously, we're building on what was in the 18th and the 19th century. But too bad for us, and maybe it's fortunate too, is that it's an oral tradition.
Mm.
So it wasn't notated. Unlike, Baroque and Western classical music, where you can find, play Mozart, you can play Bach, but, we don't know how it sounded. We can have an idea of how it sounded because if you take a look at the recordings by Abdul Hayy Hilmi,
Hmm.
Abdul Hayy Hilmi was one of the earliest Egyptian vocalists to actually record anything. The technology was very new to Egypt at the time, and his teacher Muhammad Uthman, which was one of the most prolific composers at the time, classical Arab composers, knew about this technology, heard that it's gonna come, but he knew that he's not gonna be alive for it. So he asked his student to be the one that records his compositions. So I trust that kind of reference to be a close to original indication of how Arabic music, Egyptian music sounded in the 19th century. But yeah, that's the idea, is that it was a clash of technology and transcripts. It's an oral tradition with no recording technology, and this whole recording thing could go into a different conversation. I think that
Oh, yeah.
what the microphone did to music is revolutionary, and it's a double-sided sword. And the one way it's good, on the other hand, it really changed the perspective of live music and how you consume music. In a way, I think a microphone to a musician is like the camera to a painter. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you are a painter in Firenze in 1500, your main income was from, painting the royal family or the monarchy or whoever. But suddenly there's a photographer and you're not needed, and suddenly your art takes an abstract form.
Yeah,
Okay. Same with music. If you wanted music, you have to actually bring the musicians in the room.
sure.
Now you just put a record. So I think that's a big conversation, but technology and art sometimes clash, and sometimes they are intertwined in how they shape one another.
And that's absolutely true. I mean, one of my friends who teaches music says that to experience music, you have to experience it live with musicians. Otherwise, everything else is recorded sound. And in some ways, I see that's an extreme position, but I definitely understand the reasoning. But, I might even push back and say that even though Mozart or Beethoven was transcribed and written down, that still also doesn't take account of the technology that evolved on those instruments. For example, playing a third,
Yeah,
playing an equal temperament third
yeah.
didn't wasn't something that came about necessarily
Playing the
until,
piano,
yeah,
playing Bach on
well
a
after Bach.
piano.
Exactly. The well-tempered clavier.
Yeah.
These things weren't necessarily in existence during the 16th century. So I would even go as far to make a guess or an assumption that even some of the thirds and some of the music that were being played in Venice in early music of the
Mm,
15th, 16th century may have had a closer relationship to the modal music that was played in Andalusia, brought by the Maqam music theory or the Nuba music that was played. It just goes to show again that music is not a mutually exclusive thing. People
no,
are always we're here we are bringing the pot in, and we're mixing all of our influences together, kind of like what we're doing right now today. Uh, Firas, mashallah, man, you're a treasure to the music, to everything that we've done here, and I wish you so much, so the best, and a very, very happy birthday.
Habibi.
Any last words of wisdom in this new age?
No, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this amazing conversation. I mean, every time me and you meet, it sounds like a podcast. So I'm finally thrilled we did it. Thank you, Gabby and Bryce and World Music Institute for having me. And it's a great way to kick off my new decade right before the holidays. Thank you and happy holidays to everyone.